Hey guys, Matt Lighty here, and I'm going to be reviewing and discussing, I guess, very briefly, all 32 leagues that there have been in Path of Exile, from Onslaught to Ritual. And there's, as you can see by the tabs at the top, there are a lot of leagues over a lot of years. It's been, what, 7 years? Something like that, 8 years, Path of Exile's been around. So, long time, long time. And a league is basically a temporary game state that exists for intended to be 3 months, sometimes longer because of delays and, well, shit happens. And yeah, it's just a temporary way to enjoy the game, introduce new mechanics that hopefully get introduced into standard in a good way, and fresh economy, fresh start, fresh time. So we will start from the beginning of time, all the way back in, well, 2013. Onslaught League is a very, very basic league, and all it does is make everything 20% faster and attack, cast, and movement speed. Not a whole lot to it. The biggest things that it introduced into the game, aside from some nice choice uniques like Vols and Chevrons, was the introduction of the imprinting, which imprinting fucked the game in a big way in the beginning. Eternal Orbs were something that basically was the progenitor for a lot of Harvest Crafts now and Beast Crafts and etc. It let us make mirror tier gear, 6-1 tier gear. So the Eternal Orb was something introduced in a very, very long time ago, and through the advent of Onslaught, let us make some crazy items. And they're basically, insanely expensive now in trade. I'm not even sure how much a fucking Eternal Orb costs, but probably way more than mirrors. Anarchy League, which was a fun time all around. This was basically a Rogue Exiles was what it was introduced. It was the sister league of Onslaught. Back in the day, you had a hardcore and a softcore league. Now it's just the same thing. This was two different items that were introduced, being gifts from above to Resos. But the cool thing about Anarchy was the Exiles. It was just additional unique monsters to kill, and they were actually ways initially of showing off microtransactions. Exiles, if you didn't know, are wearing full microtransactions. That's what they are. That's what they wear. It's like advertising that tries to kill you. Nemesis League, which was a fantastic league, and the fact that rare mods have cool abilities, the Nemesis mods. More so for the fact they introduced a unique that now has become a staple in the game. Headhunter, introduction to the Headhunter. In Nemesis League, Headhunter was great. Outside of Nemesis League, it was pretty worthless until Nemesis was introduced back as a mechanic. There was like a lull in time where Headhunter was really not used that often. Just like things like Calm's Heart weren't used that often. There's a lot of things that weren't used that retrospectively were insane. So interestingly enough, Headhunter's one of them. Also the taming rings was very cool. But yeah, Nemesis mods, the advent of many frustration through things like Proximity Shield and Flame Blood were introduced through Nemesis mods. So very cool mechanic and very cool league altogether. Domination League. This is what added shrines to the game. Powerful shrines that can affect both you and monsters. The biggest part about Domination League was that the shrines had packs around them. Like 2 to 3 packs normally. So if you had 3 or 4 dark shrines in a map, that's 8 to 12 packs additional, huge increased experience gain per hour. League itself had added some. It was the Gull. The Gull is not great. They were on the same plateau of rarity at the time as Headhunter and the Gull. And it was they're just not the same, clearly. So, shrines are still great. While leveling, you have things that make you larger, faster, crit, So there's a lot of cool shrines in the game. And Domination was a cool league. Ambush introduced strong boxes, but at the time there wasn't the coolest of strong boxes being a divination strong box, because divination cards weren't around when Ambush was around. So we had regular strong boxes. Currency ones were nice. The map ones were, the cornerstone of endgame mapping was based around cartographer boxes, so that was pretty cool in Ambush League. Introduction of new uniques included Void Eye, Valkyries, and Drill Neck. Drill Neck was like the quiver used on TS builds, tornado shot builds, the longest time. Valkyries, Void Eye, not as good, but Drill Neck was like fucking the go-to quiver, so that was a fantastic addition, and strong boxes are still used throughout the game, including things like Monstrous Treasure being a super desirable prophecy to get because it introduces the entire map covered in strong boxes. Invasion League, notably could be one of the rippiest leagues, dangerous of all time, was in the hardcore setting, and all this did was areas had monsters and bosses from elsewhere. Now, previously they had thematic monsters and zones. We actually went off of this, then we went back to this. So things like skeletons on the ledge, that's all there was. Invasion League, sometimes it wasn't just skeletons. Sometimes there was, goat people, or sometimes there was like necromancer. Sometimes there were strange things, packs of mobs following these strange unique monsters. These unique monsters were bullshit. Some of these were notoriably rippy. I mean, now a lot of them are relegated to Val side zones, but some of them included the Porcupine that had both reflects on it. And this is when reflect was an off-screen mechanic that you could just kill yourself on. So imagine shooting a tornado shot, and then one arrow goes 3 screens away, clips a Porcupine, you one-shot yourself. That was Invasion League. Introduced Rear Guard also. Another quiver, ironically. Both quivers were in this league set. Both still pretty okay quivers. Rear Guard, really notable choice for any of the bow builds that want to just reach an easy kind of cap block, because you can slap this on, put on glancing blows, and then you got, you know, almost 50% chance to block attacks. So pretty nice there. Rampage League, which at the time was a snooze fiesta, mostly because all it did was implement, well, a minor kill streak mechanic. But retrospectively, the gloves, being Shadow and Dust being the best of them, and other ways to get Rampage like Bisco's Belt or, you know, whatever other means you have access to, fantastic mechanic, huge for clear speed. Rampage was a masterfully implemented league after the fact, I would say, and the fact that these uniques are very good. They're very good. Any way you can game Rampage now is pretty huge for clear speed. So whether it's Shadow and Dust, whether it's Abyssal's Belt, you know, whether it's whatever you can get Rampage from, either Whirling Dervish and your weapon swap. Rampage, okay league at the time, just whatever. But the actual mechanic is fantastic for clear. Gives you damage, gives you move speed, gives you map-wide clear. Rampage is fun time. Beyond League, arguably at the time, I mean, at the time it was one of the best leagues ever implemented as far as the feeling of being in hardcore and beyond was hard to describe. Really only akin to, at the time, maybe Invasion, where it was every single pack you killed could be your last. When you killed things together, they spawned little puddles, and those puddles spawned big monsters, and sometimes those big monsters spawned bigger monsters. You know, beyond bosses such as Host and a Boxoth were just crazy rippy at the time, and in the league themselves, the certain amount of rare modifiers these monsters could get would, you know, allow yourself to be instantly deleted from the game. The actual uniques they implemented weren't that exciting at the time. Edge of Madness was never really that cool. Darkseid was always just a generically okay scepter. Didn't have 3 variations back then, and the Harvest was actually quite used. The Flask on crit effect was really only other found through Pathfinder, and Flasks with Pathfinders were so good back then that even some Flask Finder builds would utilize it with, you know, making the Worm Blaster build, making various types of builds that you could use the Harvest to get your Flasks back instantly. So the Harvest was quite interesting, and not to mention it looked really fucking cool. But Beyond League, still an insane thing for quantifying modifiers. You know, you could stack Beyond 2, 3, 4 times up to increase the chance of it occurring to, you know, insane rates and really juice up your experience per hour, your loot per hour. So especially on Delirious maps now, and the new Echoes of the Atlas, you can even get Beyond juiced even higher. So Beyond, very cool. Bloodlines is the redheaded stepchild of Nemesis, kind of. It's, instead of rares having cool mods, it's magic mobs have cool mobs. But there's more magic mobs in the game, and they come in packs. And the only spooky and interesting, in my opinion, Bloodlines modifiers were both removed. There's only one representation of one of them, and that's Phylacteral Link was the one. Phylacteral Link is the same as the Crystal Ore boss, the 3 different bosses. They have that link on the ground, a little effect that shows on their feet, and that means you can only tag the one and do damage to one that has the circle. There used to be whole packs roaming around with that. The second mod was called Necrovigil. That one also existed, that put little circles in the ground that when you killed stuff in it, everything that was in that circle was now unkillable. You had to kite the mobs out of the circles. There was actually one more. There was Thorns, just straight up Thorns. So instead of Reflect being a percentage of damage you deal, Thorns was a flat amount of damage based off of how much frequency of hitting. So for the faster attacking builds, that one-shot them. It's just like a new method to one-shot you. And Bloodlines introduced the 3 unique rings. Tassalio's Sign, which there's a replica of, Namahu's Sign, and Valaco's Sign. Tassalio's was okay, Namahu's was really never good, but Valaco's was extremely useful during the time and even for years afterwards. To get 1% damage on basically against leeching, period, and the amount of actual damage it offered, which was up to 60% ring, not to mention getting like the equivalent of shock cap, very, very good ring, Valaco's Sign at the time, and also very rare as of right now. Torment was a very divisive league because its initial implementation wasn't really used as intended. Now, Torment introduced spirits, and these spirits would walk through mobs, and they would tag the mobs, giving them an innate quantity modifier along with a little buff depending on the spirit, and then they would eventually find a host of a rare, possess it, and now that thing has additional modifiers. So some sort of weird, ghostly version of Nemesis in a way. The interesting part about Torment was you could stack these ghosts, and you could then vacuum them up with builds that did reverse knockback as some sort of whirling dervish vacuum type cyclone system, and gather up mass amounts of ghosts, sucking up the entire map, and then killing them all at once. And this was in conjunction with the Gloves Southbounds. Now, with Southbounds in conjunction with the old Champion Ascendancy, you could basically hit something, as long as you'll do no damage to them, stun them, suck them up. They can't be killed because they're not frozen. And then you, once you have the entire map sucked, let me just show you what it looks like. Okay, so here's a video of what Ghostbusting used to look like. You would basically just cycling around and gather these chunks of packs that had ghosts in them, and then just create these huge laggy piles of ghosts. And then you would kind of congregate them all together, and then eventually kill them at the end. So after he's gathered all his, pretty much the entire map, you just accept the fact that this is what you're going to get. You have your infinite life get on hit, everything's stunned, everything's safe. Now what you do is now you log off on this character, log back on your second character, which has some sort of item rarity or item quantity. There's the ghost that just touched everything now. And then you're going to hop on the different character and kill the entire pack. So you can see everything in the entirety of the pile. Now here he is in the secondary character, which is some sort of caustic. Well, it was actually called Poison Arrow back then. All right, here he goes. Here's the old shore. So now he's going to go kill his pile, and he'll get all his loot that was now ghost touched. And yeah, this was just a way of just, hyper juicing maps, and it was really all the cool part that Torment had at the time. But yeah, Torment League now introduced some interesting uniques. Produced the Lead Sprinkler was fantastic. Led to a cacophony of fucking builds that had to do with like Molten Strike and all that type of shit. Skulls had some cool interactions with Cast Never Taken, but overall, Torment was an interesting league. Ghosts are kind of hated, but there's some implementations now for the new Seance, notable from Echoes of the Atlas. That's pretty nice with them. Tempest League was it was with the sister league of Warbands at the time, and it was an interesting league because it implemented third-party websites that we used to track. This was not, through Path of Exile. We had to use third-party websites to track rotating storms in different zones with a really shitty reporting system that barely worked, just like Warbands had. And it was just, little circles in the ground that if you stepped in them, you got a buff. That was really the entirety of the league. Some cool uniques. I guess Jordhaus was kind of used. Troll Timber and Crown are shit, and Gilfbins is pretty much garbage, but still rare as fuck. Tempest League really only used now through things like Val Winds to get a bunch of 6-links with Corrupting Tempest, but aside from that, pretty shit. Warbands was an interesting one. Again, sister league of, or brother league, I guess, of Tempest. Used a third-party website to track where warbands were going to be, what maps, what areas, which warbands, but a lot more uniques, a lot more usefulness of these uniques. Now Red Blade banners used for, like, Warcry builds, Brian Whalers, and Whisper Steps from Mute Winds were always just great boots overall. The rings were kind of lackluster. Red Blade Trampler was actually used a lot even for some deep delve builds to get free Burning Ground immunity if you couldn't get it during the Endless Delve event. Pariah and Steppenerd, both fantastic items. Pariah's notably used for its free quantity, 15% quantity. You could use Virichian Research from Betrayal to automatically guarantee a white socket. Use profit margin there for leagues and leagues and leagues and years for people actually using making white Pariahs. So fantastic there. Steppenerd's great boots, and Broken Faith is a pretty cool little shield that gave you Unholy Might, so kind of cool. Warbands now have been on various map devices, prophecies, map mods. It really shows up a lot of places, so Warbands is a cool league that technically have their own notables, but they're so outclassed that they might as well be removed from the game. So, Warbands themselves are very awesome. Talisman League. This was a league that implemented talismans. And it was a totally different system than we have right now. In the Talisman League, you would drop a talisman, you'd go to an altar and trade 5 up for 1 higher of a different tier, of which there are a variety of bases and a variety of uniques. These uniques included the cool belts, Feast, Famine, and then the Wretch. And then it had some other uniques, including Rigwald's Quills, which was like best quiver in the game for a while. Savagery and Command, which are pretty much worthless dog shit. And same with Rigwald's Crest. Although Rigwald's Savagery and Command were used as offhands during stat sticky times, but now they're just even weirder. Big pull being Eyes of the Great Wolf to get cool implicits, but the actual uniques themselves are kind of build enabling. Rigwald Curse gets you, crit face breakers. Spine Fused Talismans is like just free quantity. Now talismans just drop randomly from bullshit, and they are anointed, and they tend to have pretty good rolls, but Talisman League has been totally changed from what it was initially, so it's just a different mechanic altogether. Apprentice League, the introduction of the Schmeckle Shop, the man who carries all the Schmeckles, Kadir Apprentice himself. This was a league that introduced little chests that dropped some coins in the ground, and every now and then the fat man would show up and you could spend your coins. That's it. The problem with the league, if anything, was that the coins dropped in very small piles. But the uniques themselves are actually pretty universally good, a lot of them. 7 league steps, I mean, they're used in a lot of places. It's just 50 movement in a boot, so, fantastic there overall. Parandus Manor was just a cool map that, for years, was just an annoying expense you had to dish out during Trade League to get your 155 Awakening bonus. I mean, to get your Atlas completed to do Parandus Manor, and it was just fucking expensive. Xerxes was a totally build-enabling flask that actually gave you, a lot of interesting stuff. Gives you a huge amount of life recovery based off your mana, and some really cool interactions with this with a lot of, the big mana builds. Umbilicus was like a flasky zombie thing, kind of whatever. Tripanon, people tried to make work. Rise tried to make this work with this shitty SRS build, but you gotta hand it to him. It's kind of a mean weapon because it has a 100% chance to crit, but it's, slower than old people fuck, so it's like a bit of a meme, but it looks great. And Varanustra was just the best weapon for one-hands in the game for like 2 years because it could just triple dip on all these different tree notables, and we didn't have clusters back then, so getting notables was pretty much it. And then it counted as every single weapon. It took care of your mana. It had pretty good base stats. So Varanustra was like just the backbone of one hand for like years. Apprentice League implemented now in various ways through Zana, through different Scarab type things, different Echoes of the Atlas notables, and it's pretty okay now. Again, one of the best things about coins that people don't realize, you can vendor them for Wisdom Scrolls. So if you ever don't have coins and you're in Trade League, you don't want to buy Wisdom Scrolls, just vendor a fucking bunch of coins. You get some free Wisdom Scrolls. Prophecy League introduced, at the time, the most uniques by a metric fuck ton. 72, I believe, uniques were introduced in Prophecy League. I mean, there's 1,000 fucking faded versions of things, not to mention the base ones also. So tons of uniques in Prophecy overall. It's just a pile, a literal pile of uniques. And you had the 4 base ones. Reach of the Council at the time was best bow in the game. Grip of the Council, fantastic. Again, they're still could be the best minion gloves in the game. Breath of the Council was just the go-to, Chaos Caster weapon. Kintsugi now is actually still one of the better chests in the game. If you're going to use unique chests, offers one of the more better defensive things. Basically transformed Kintsugi into a notable and Windwalker on the tree, so that's how good that is. A billion faded uniques, all of which are pretty fucking solid. Death's Opus, if great bow, nerfed a little bit now, but still great. Void Heart was used on every single melee build in the game and gave them 100% bleed and poison at the time. Doomfletch Prism was just like the bow build for like 6 to 8 months. Signal Fire now used for all the physical Blade Vortex to Avatar Fire build, so fantastic there. And a whole list of other ones that are just as great. Prophecy League lets you use your silver coins with Navali, and just gives you a little bit of extra goodies along the way. The only downside about Prophecy is that you tend to have to go back and do bullshit in random acts to actually, clear off some of your prophecies. So if you're not going to seal them and toss them, that's the way to do it. But as far as usage in the game, you got coins, you use them, you progress lines if you feel like it. If not, I just tend to save up my coins and then, clear off and seal and destroy tons of things at a time and just see what I get. Essence was a, extremely lackluster league, I would say. It just have these sealed essences that you click 3 times, and when you click them 3 times, a rare pops out that has some bullshit mods. Notably, these mods are not a big deal in maps, but when it comes to Delve, is the scariest thing in all of the game. Nothing is more terrifying in the entirety of Path of Exile, for those who don't know, than in the Essence notable node in Deep Delve. Talking thousands of depths deep, Essence node is just the worst thing in the world. Satan incarnate, pretty much. But essences are a slammable form of currency that guarantee a specific mod. That's all it is. Here's a very colorful chart that does colorful things. But basically, you have you slam a thing that gives you tier 2 cold, and everything else random. It came with like a couple interesting ones: Hysteria, Insanity, Horror, and Delirium. Notable ones are Insanity for gloves was pretty huge at the time. A lot of people used movement skills. They would slap their gloves in there. Give you 16% more attack and cast, more. It's not increased, more multiplier, which was really, really nice. Delirium gave you a huge amount of damage. Nope, wrong one. Horror gives you a huge amount of damage, a 30% more multiplier in helmets, which now that we have these multiple influenced Maven increased statistic helmets, you can get like these ghetto 8 to 9 link helmets, so Horror is still fantastic. But yeah, Essences is still great in the game. Really, it's probably one of the best ways in the game to get high stats. Kind of hard to hit, even with Harvest, to hit like 50, 60 strength on a ring or on a belt or wherever. So between Essence and other crafting like fossils, Essence is great for that. Getting those high stats and just making some nice gear. Breach League implemented, well, breaches, which were purple hands that you would click. They would have a circle that goes outward. You'd kill things, they drop splinters. Sometimes bosses would spawn for the represented breaches, whether it's cold, fire, lightning, physical, or chaos. You would kill those bosses or do as much as you can. They would drop more splinters. Then you'd collect your splinters and be happy. There was a breach ring. These were not very good. They would drop corrupted, and they just had normally shit stats. And all the stats would be doubled inside of a breach stone or a breach, but it's just not worth really while. Breaches themselves did drop breach stones. You'd run these, and you'd get the corresponding chance at fight. You'd fight the boss if you progressively cleared them, and hopefully get a blessing. Hopefully get one of the uniques. So Zoff dropped Zoff items, Toll dropped Toll items. A lot of these are still super fucking strong. So super good ones include, all the amulets are pretty great in general. Halcyon becoming Pandemonious is it's actually one of the better amulets in the game, I would say, full stop. I put it, could be top 10 unique amulet, honestly. This thing is pretty disgusting. So there's some great things came from Breach. Hand of Wisdom in action builds, Anticipation and Surrender Shield, fantastic. Skin of the Loyal, Skin of the Lords, insane body armor. Eye of Chiula being upgraded to Presence of Chiula was great. The jewels. Breach had a lot of stuff. Notably, one of the best things about Breach was the experience in the Breach Stones. One of the best methods of getting experience in the game at the moment is running a pure Chiula Breach Stone. Granted, they do cost two Exalted each, give or take at times, depending on leagues, and you're going to have to do rotations of them, but it's the fastest way to get to 100 probably in the game. It's just running pure Chiula Breach Stone. So, in general, if you're in League, even just regular Breach Stones, it's like the quickest way to get from level 70 to like 85 is just buy Breach Stones and run them. And normally you'll break even, and it's pretty good loot, and it's great experience. So Breach was a fantastic league, implemented in the game as a core mechanic, and it's just, you can find it fucking everywhere now. Maps have breaches, Scarabs have breaches, sections have breaches, they're just breaches. So, great mechanic, loved by most, and terrible launch, though, for those who weren't there for the launch. Europe, went down for 4 days. The surface just, took a shit. So, overall, though, great league. Legacy League was like a filler league. It's the only league that not really added to the game, but it was just kind of a filler between expansions. And this implemented reliquary keys, which was an extremely rare item that dropped, and it gave you legacy versions or special versions of uniques. But really, it introduced League Stones, which were just shitty versions of Scarabs. So we had League Stones that would turn on ambush in the zone. It was just a terrible Scarab. Although now there's some interesting things that they have that Scarabs don't. So, food for thought to maybe get some of the old ones implemented back in. But, League Stone and Apprentice League was a filler league that had the reliquary keys and basically just gave us a way of, testing out some stuff, and it was just a precursor to Scarabs. Harbinger League, still one of the, actually could be now the most loved league simply because of the new, Harbinger node, the reinforcements node on the Echoes of the Atlas tree. Harbinger just has a invulnerable man, summons a bunch of shitty ghosts that you fight, and they drop you pennies. That's the gist of the league. But these pennies add up, and the experience is a lot, and then you get to do the beachhead. The beachhead's a fun place. Beachhead's a giant beach, as described, and it lets you fight a ton of Harbingers and a ton of mobs, and then you get a good amount of experience, and you get fragments to craft some of the Harbinger gear. And then there's 3 different types of beachheads, white, yellow, and red. Difficulty's increasing, obviously, and you get your little fragments, you get your little experience, and you have a good time. And then there's also Infused Beachhead, which now drops other pieces. And these pieces are scrolls that let you upgrade old Harbinger items into bigger versions. Most notably, the Timelight Scroll making the Flow and Tether become the Torrent's Reclamation, which in my opinion is the best belt in the game, full stop. And a lot of really cool uniques came out of Harbinger. A lot of great times came out of Beachhead rotations. It was at the time, but this was before pure Breach Stones existed, so you just had, it was Chula Breach Stones, and then you went into Beachhead, and this was what a great transition of experience, and it was, everyone was level 95 minimum in Trade League, because it was just, everyone was doing Beachhead rotations. That's all the end game was. At the time, it was kind of boring, but still it was fun just to be able to do Beachhead nonstop all day, so in a way it was cool, but in general, Harbinger League was, mixed feelings going back, but as of now, it's a great mechanic. You get some, get your little shekels, get your ancient shards, which is a huge one. Mirror shards could technically drop. The shard system was introduced during Harbinger League, so that was kind of cool. But just some nice little schmeckles, nice experience, good times. Abyss League, you click a thing, and then a fissure pops up, and you fight some spooky ghoulies. That's basically the league. And every now and then, the spooky ghoulies stop coming out, and a hole spawns, and you walk in that hole. Then you get to wander around, and sometimes you'll fight a boss. That's the league. The league introduced Abyssal Sockets and the Abyssal Jewels. Now, these jewels are really cool. They would drop from the either the chest or inside the depths. There was chests in there, or inside there you'd find bosses and stuff like that. And Abyssal Jewels had a lot of cool rolls. You also got the Stygian belt, which was the belt that had a free socket in it. Just pretty much the best belt and base in the game for all rares. And then the Abyss Uniques, which had a lot of cool functionality. 1 or 2 socket versions. And they were a bit different back in the day. Light Poacher was just the best item in Path of Exile when it came out. It was used for like a year straight. And you basically just put in the helmet like GMP and Fork. And then that just was free AoE. Light Poacher gave you so much clear speed when there was basically no cooldown on the Spirit Burst mechanic that just, GMP'd out of you and forked and chained everywhere, and it was just completely one-shot entire map. So you can be playing like, a heavy strike build, but if you had Light Poacher, you'd be one-shotting the screen. So it's been nerfed to oblivion now, and there's some still good items like Bubonic Trail is pretty fantastic, and so is Tomb Fist. So yeah, Abyssal Socket's cool uniques. At the moment, it's a great way of getting some free loot and free experience. Echoes had a cool implementation of increasing the item level of the areas of the Abyssal Depths, so that's pretty cool from Echo's expansion. But yeah, Abyss League was great, good times. Liches themselves are pretty rare, and if you didn't know, when you do walk into Depth, Liches do have a different loading screen. So if you see me on stream saying, oh, there's no Lich, and I just move on, it's because of one of two things. If you touch a Depth and it splits more than one time, it won't ever spawn an Abyssal Depth, so you can't get Lich. There's your one thing. Second thing is, if I do spawn an Abyssal Depth and I go inside, if the load screen looks like Twilight Strand, there is no Lich. If it looks like something else aside from Twilight Strand, there's guaranteed a Lich. That is how I know there's a Lich or not. So, yeah. Bestiary League has very much changed since its initial conception. Back in the day, it was like Pokemon. You had nets and you had to catch beasts and get them low and this whole bullshit. They removed that. Now you just, find a beast, you kill it, Einhard pops up, captures it for you, Bob's your uncle, you go back to the beast thing and you get a free item. That's it. It implemented the Bestiary Uniques with the Bestiary bosses and their respective aspects, like Crab or the aspect of the cat, etc. A lot of great ones. Aspect of the spider's used heavily. Feral's fur is used heavily. Sakawal's nest is used heavily. Even Crab body is great. Crab boots don't exist. A lot of great uniques that came out of this. Some of them still don't even have unique art, which is a travesty. And then bestiaries themselves, of course, implement a lot of cool things like split beasts to make different items or imprint beasts to save craft. So bestiary, fantastic leave implementation. Really just something I clear off at the end of the day, pretty much. If I check at the end of the day, all right, cool, I did any beasts. Let's see what I got, and that's that. And that's, there's a lot of cool implementation with echoes and, Gilded Bestiary Scarabs for getting a ton of red beasts. It's fantastic. Incursion League was the you assisting an old lady fight through time. That's pretty much what it is. You help this lady named Alva Valai in it and make temples and eventually get loot. And it's a very complicated mechanic, but it's also not. It's hard to talk about. Long story short, you help her build a temple, you upgrade the rooms, you get some cool stuff, and then you fight a boss. And the boss hopefully drops one of these vials, which lets you upgrade one of these items into bigger versions. There's also some cool things you can get, like Shadow Stitch, which is created from the corruption thing that lets you double corrupt things. There's a lot to temples in general, but a lot of these uniques that the upgrade versions are pretty insane. Apep Supremacy, pretty insane. Coward's Legacy, pretty insane. Slave Driver's Hand, I honestly would not play a trap build unless I had Slave Driver's Hand. Fate of the Val, we're just going to skip that one. Mask of Stitch Demon, it's the best item for Animate Guardian for keeping them alive. Omeocan, best in slot boots for most agnostic builds. All the jewels are pretty good. Xerfia's Heart also does things. Soul Ripper, probably one of the top 5 best flasks in the game, if not, could be the best flask as far as unique flask goes. It enables some crazy things. And they also had a whole bevy of mods that you can get, including things like Guadalizzi mod, which is the hybrid Tier 1 life and Tier 1% life. So a lot of great mods, a lot of great uniques, a lot of great chase items, a lot of good experience, and a lot of just great stuff altogether. Incursion League is a cool league overall. It's something that you should try to clear off every day if you're in Soul Self-Hunt especially. You want to be doing as many temples as you can, although it can be a little painstaking at the times. Incursion is a fantastic league for loot and experience. Delve is a different dimension. To talk about it in less than a minute is almost disheartening and a travesty, but I'll do my best. Delve is where you follow a cart into the mine, the Azurite mine, try to go as deep as you can, find as much as you can, utilizing the sulfite that you get from the surface world and maps, and gathering azurite to upgrade your experience and make it so your flares are better, your dynamite's better, your resistance to darkness is better, and your light radius is better, and upgrading yourself along the way. Delve has some insane experience, capping at an I-83 zone and roughly depth 150. But the deeper you go, the more shit you find. It offers a host of really new uniques, some interesting ones like Mark of Submission for an instant curse on hit of any sort of ring, or Hex on hit now. Soul Rest, a totally build-enabling staff. 3 different bosses that drop a bevy of uniques themselves, and rings which can be crafted in combination with other rings of the same type, i.e. one meadow, one mountain, one valley, in a plethora of color combinations, which will get you different precursor emblems, which can roll a litany of randomized mods, which are just these hyper chase unique items that can be totally insane for charge stacking builds. Also includes Crystal King, which is one of the cooler bosses in the game, and his his jewelry box full of amulets that lets you run some free auras. And there's really cool boots that give you free purities off of a map from one of the 3 bosses. And there's also new Abyssal Socket items from one of the 3 bosses. Not to mention the fossil system, which is a whole crafting system that lets you use fossils to craft targeted mods and items, kind of like, what's it called? Essence does. Not to mention fractured fossils, which lets you duplicate Delirious maps and Grand Heists. Delve is a whole 20-minute conversation in itself. But yeah, it's a fantastic league. In my opinion, one of the top 3 leagues of the game. Totally changed the gamescape of Path of Exile, adding not only a potential for a different leveling method down the road, not only a potential for a medium and end game area, but a whole other deep delving zone, an infinite treasure trove of currency to be found. You just have to build around it. And such new experiences, new builds await you in the deep, deep depths of Delve. Betrayal League was, for many people, a total mindfuck, and what it added was the Immortal Syndicate. Now, on paper, the league is pretty simple when I'm about to describe it. Long story short, Katarina was a necromancer, and she resurrected a bunch of people. And these people pop up in 4 different ways. Either they're smuggling transportation, hiding in a house, inside of a fortress, or popping up trying to kill you. And when you kill them, you either side with them, or you become their enemies. And this gives you this spider-like board that lets you decide what relationships you want to have with who. And eventually you get to raid their safe houses, whether it's a safe house for smuggling, safe house for hiding in the research, safe house for the fortress, or safe house for assassination. And once you raid enough of these hideouts, you get to fight the necromancer Katarina herself. And she drops a couple cool uniques. The whole thing is a very complicated system to actually set up for your first time. But once you learn it, it's not very easy and you do it every league. This also implemented charged, enriched, and pure breach stones, which are higher versions of breach stones. Scarabs, which were, we talked about earlier, the league stones from Legacy League. This is what they are now. They're called Scarabs, and they do the same thing but cooler. 3 different variations and rarities of those. Actual uniques themselves, 4 from Katarina, and 4 that randomly can drop when interrogating a safe house boss. So after you build up enough intelligence and decide, I'm going to raid the fortification safe house, and you do that, and you kill, we'll say, Haku is in charge, and you interrogate him to get more information about the mastermind, Katarina. He has a 1 in 4 chance of dropping one of these 4 items: Vivinsect, Hyperboreas, Crimson Storm, or Paradoxica, which all have the Veiled modifiers on them, which was all, oh, it lets me see what it is. That's interesting. Veiled modifiers were added in this league, and it's just new crafts that you have to first discover. So it's a craft with a chore, pretty much. Now, these Veiled modifiers are pretty cool, and they do a lot of interesting things. Some of those things are the trigger craft on weapons, meaning if you trigger a various spells socket in the item, if you've casted recently, which is something that people chase every single league at the beginning for their caster wands. Other things include reductions to ailments and stuns on body armor, or plus gems on weapons. Not to mention Devouring Diadem, which is a fantastic helmet, and Cinder Swallow, which could be the best flask in the game in my opinion. Betrayal added a bevy of items and a bevy of different upgrades through the Scarabs, and totally implemented a new mapping system because of that. Not to mention a whole setup you have to do every single league, and little min-maxing values from getting the right people in the right spots and the right times. So Betrayal League, although a little complicated to understand at first, offers some really insane value, especially in Trade League, for the thirsty player looking for some new knowledge to soak up. Synthesis League was probably the most polarizing league in Path of Exile history, up until maybe Heist recently. It was a crafting league that was kind of gated to the average player, I would say. There was a whole system involving fractured, synthesized, and the memory nexus, and this whole crafting section that was basically, it's now been removed in full stop. But it lets you craft different items and made some insane item bases. Now, that aside, it's now been implemented in a unique map, of which there are 5, I believe. These 5 unique maps, culmination, give you a lot of great things along the way, and they have a cool unique at the end. That's the gist of the league. The 3 league uniques themselves can't even drop from the maps because the maps themselves don't have the map tags. So Maloney's Mechanism, Martial Legion, High-Risk Truth can only get through things like Jack in the Box or Bestiary, but they could still drop in the game. The Cortex, the biggest of them, drop things like Bottled Faith and Garb of the Ephemeral, Offering of the Serpent, and Nebulous. All pretty solid items overall. Bottled Faith is up for contention of being one of the best flasks in the game, as it offers a insane value, just free damage and free base crit. The non-Cortex synthesis maps do drop the rings, though, and the rings are pretty gross overall. They have 2 random modifiers that have to do with heralds, whether it's ash, ice, purity, agony, or thunder. Not to mention they do have synthesized implicits, of which there are a bevy. So you could get a ring that has the right 2 modifiers and also insane synthesis base. It could be something along the lines of, flammability on hit, or mana gain on hit, or something, or multiplier on hit. It's insane things. So the synthesis has been implemented in a really cool way with unique maps. You pretty much run them when you get them. It's actually best to not even ID them. If you run them un-ID'd, they have more quantity, which is just free shit. The maps themselves come with random modifiers, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But yeah, synthesis has been pretty much stripped down to where you don't have access to fractured and synthesized items anymore through synthesis, but they do randomly drop in things like previously it was Harvest, you could do it. Things like Heist would randomly drop them. Things like Ritual League randomly drop items that either have fractured mods or come with synthesized implicits. So it's in a game in some way, shape, or form, but at the moment it's pretty much just through the unique maps themselves. Legion League is a league that spawns giant monoliths where you get to fight snapshots through history of Path of Exile, war between 2 different rival nations and armies. And you would fight these people, and after they've unlocked their chrysalis, they would drop some loot. That was basically it. And then you get a bunch of fragments, and those fragments are then used to start a war. And you would fight these 2 to 3 to 4 to 5-way wars between different factions, and get hopefully timeless jewels, which had different seeded permutations on the tree that would take over a circular section of the tree and give you different values depending on what's hovering them, what random number modifier you have. Meaning if you had an Elegant Hubris that had exactly 2,000 number on it, that in the one specific spot, and if I had 2,000 and my friend Jake from State Farm also had 2,000, his would do the exact same thing. So it's seeded. So they do the exact same things in the exact same spots for everybody. But there's so many permutations that it's very, very hard to find the exact one you want. So it's pretty much just a divine crapshoot. A whole litany of uniques were added. A lot of old uniques were actually updated to be way better in most every case. Notably, Malagaro's Virtuosity's got a huge, huge buff. Asenath's Gentle Touch got an astronomical buff. They gave it an explosion modifier, which is like one of the more desirable things in the game. So free loot, updated uniques, new uniques, and some crazy, crazy seedable jewels that were now used to min-max even further. Legion League was pretty loved by all, I would say. Blighted League was Path of Exile's take on tower defense, basically. You would work with Sister Cassia to set up a tower defense against waves of enemies, and you would upgrade your towers and then get oils, and then oils can be used to put on your gear to make your tower stronger, and also anoint free notables on tree. You could use a certain combination of different oils to get a notable on your amulet. And they also added new uniques. So there's some uniques were added in the game in Blighted League, notably Badge of the Brotherhood, top, one of the rarest, more desirable items in the entire game. Only cool guys have that, right? And then the Blighted Uniques would drop off of the Blight maps that you would sometimes get. Blight maps was like a Blight you'd find in the wild. Instead of a couple seconds of tower defense, it's like 5 minutes of pure non-stop tower defense. These had a chance of dropping the Blighted Uniques, which themselves can be anointed, meaning you could definitely have an anoint on your amulet, but using Breasters have anoint on your gloves. I mean, you can then have 2 notables on tree, super fucking far apart, that you can now get because you have the right, Blighted Uniques on. Breast Dealers are also just fantastic gloves. Stampedes are fantastic boots. Spore Guard gives you more explosion, which is always fantastic. These helmets are theoretically good, but realistically shit. They can have 2 enchant modifiers, but the odds of hitting 2 right enchantments are 0%. So yeah, blight maps are like little juiced up loot pinatas in the form of tower defense. So fantastic league in my opinion. Metamorph League is something I should skip. Now, Metamorph League is a league where you basically build your own, it's like a Build-A-Bear workshop, but meets Frankenstein. You gather body parts for killing different rares and unique mobs and maps, and you make a monster that when you kill then drops a piece of its body, and you go to Tane's laboratory and you fight that beast, and hopefully you get a cool Metamorph Unique, of which there are 4, not even that many, but some of them are insanely good, like Astral Projector, which makes it so your things are Nova spells that can now be targeted in location. So instead of Ice Nova being around you, you could target where Ice Nova is, which is a totally different playstyle. Also introduce catalysts, which add quality to rings and amulets and belts, which can actually do more than you'd think. Examples of this of amulets that have, like, we'll say 6% reduced aura reservation, right? Well, if it's catalyzed, that 6 becomes a 7. And you might not think 1% is a big deal, but it is. This could push you having from 50 or 60 strength in a ring to like 70 strength in a ring. It's a pretty noticeable amount. So catalysts are great min-maxing. Always good to have new uniques despite them not existing. Metamorph League was a pretty minimal league, but it makes sense because it was implemented alongside an expansion, which tends to be the case. Delirium League, I would say on par with Delve for impact in the game. Totally changed the way we view mapping. It totally added layers of difficulty, layers of loot, layers of challenge through the Delirium Orb and Delirium Effect. And when you Deliriums are mirrors that would start spawning in, you find them in like Act 6 and on, but really in maps. And when you walk through them, the whole place gets fogged up. And it's supposed to tick behind you like a wave moving. You're supposed to clear and push with it. And as you clear, things get harder and more loot drops and these kind of grotesque monsters spawn. And at the end, when you kill a bunch, you get a bunch of uniques and cool good things. And then sometimes you get cluster jewels are implemented also. Cluster jewels are jewels you could put on the outskirts of your tree, which you can then nest jewels inside of them. Larges that have 2 sockets for mediums that have 2 sockets for smalls, giving you branches of jewels going outward. These jewels have insane lists of notables that totally changed how we view passive trees in the game. Deliriums themselves can then drop delirious orbs. These are used to put on maps and craft 20, 40, 60, 80, 100% delirious maps, increasing in difficulty exponentially, increasing in loot exponentially. 100% delirium maps are the benchmark of hyper endgame builds. Can your build clear 100% delirious juiced to the gills tier 16? And if it can, you're going to reap the rewards. These then drop Simulacrum Splinters, which is another whole thing. Leads you to the Simulacrum, which is a 20-wave delirious zone that got progressively harder and more damaging and tankier and more rewarding, ending at wave 20, which is like even, just things take like 98% reduced damage and almost one-shot you, and it's a whole cool, crazy place with great experience per hour, great rewards. It's like a blighted map on crack, but, all foggy. That in itself dropped a whole litany of uniques, including Voices, which was which on paper looks like nothing, maybe at the time. If we saw this 10 years ago, it'd be like, what the fuck is this? It's a jewel that has 3 sockets and that's it. But you know what? 3 sockets is insane, it turns out. That's all it needs to have. It lets you nest in, 3 medium clusters, which on certain builds means you're running, 9 medium clusters, which stacking effects become just insane. Tons of cool uniques were added. Tons of cool jewels were added to the bosses that would spawn in maps. Omniphobia and Kosis, 2 awesome, scary bosses whenever they pop up. Build enabling things like One with Nothing giving you the Hollow Palm Monk Attack technique. Calamitous Vision zooping up and juicing the solo Herald builds in conjunction with things like Synthesis Rings. Overall, Delirium was revolutionary for Path of Exile. Its implementation of a new mapping mechanic, a new endgame zone in Simulacrum, totally new view of passive trees and cluster jewels, and some crazy build enabling uniques. Still, I think to this day, a lot of people view it as could be the best league of all time. Speaking of the best league of all time in the eyes of the public, we have Harvest League, which was a crafting league done right, I guess, in the wake of Synthesis. Harvest League allowed the everyday man to deterministically and slowly craft a perfect 6 tier 1 item in everyday shape. It's just perfect. Perfect is perfect. Let like Johnny Two Stash, who plays an hour a night over the course of 2 weeks, make 800 physical damage per second sword, 6 tier 1, white sockets with enchants, and all the bells and whistles. It lets you create a farm that you use to plant seeds in and set up a little system where you would grow these seeds and then harvest them, gaining modifiers. These modifiers would be used to craft things, and it's a billion of them. There's different tiers of seeds, and the better the tier, normally the better the rewards, leading up to tier 4s, which were super good rewards, and also some bosses. These bosses were giant bears that dropped their belts, birds that dropped their helmets, or cats that dropped their fangs. Eventually you could fight the Oshabi, the leader of the whole, whole tribe, I guess. She was the tender of the harvest, and she would drop her fancy things like the Forbidden Shako and the Witch Hunter's Judgment. A lot of cool build-enabling uniques. Implemented the infused beachheads we talked about earlier, giving you the updated items to the belts. That is the Harvest, the Torrent's Reclamation fantasy. Updates to Scarabs, even the higher tier, Winged Scarab, just that much better. Updated the Labyrinth, which was a dead mechanic, now slightly less dead, in 3 different forms, Dedication, Gift, and Tribute. Updated Bestiary with lures, which have you much higher chances of finding Bestiary bosses and specified rare beasts. Harvest was in the front, it was like 2 hours of annoying work to set up a farm that lets you enjoy crafting to the fullest for 6 weeks straight, pretty much. That's what Harvest was. And it's now in the game in a toned down manner, but in also a very streamlined manner. You find Harvest in maps, you check the pre-planted plots, you get to save them up to 10 at a time, and you enjoy your crafts. And it's still fantastic. It's still great. Totally revamped what crafting was. And because builds could be walking around reliably with 6 tier 1 items, it totally changed how you built your passive tree. Totally changed how you could play certain builds. It made unviable builds kind of viable because you could get insane gear, insane weapons. It really pushed the envelope to what a build could do. Not only in the mapping, not only in delving, not only in the labyrinth, but every conceivable aspect of it. Harvest totally changed the game. And its implementation to the core of the game now will be forever changing. Heist League was one cracked out intern's fever dream, I'm still convinced. And it's basically like 6 leagues rolled into one, all half-assed. Heist League is where you help a band of rogues rob different locations in these contracts, and you have to update the rogues' gear, they level up, and you have to do these quest lines that really do nothing, help these 5 random supporting characters, pick up these rogue marker currencies to run these contracts. You can't do this, it doesn't go work on the map device, you have to go to a specific place called the Rogue Harbor to do it. Then you eventually get Grand Heist, which you had to pay for, unlock the areas for, plan it out, and then at any point in time during the Grand Heist, regular heist, if you died as you're escaping, you lose everything, because it's technically contraband. The doors didn't work half the time. The NPCs didn't work a third of the time. Nothing really worked for the first month. Sometimes entire wings of your Grand Heist would disappear. You couldn't even access the Rogue Harbor. Technically, it was about as much of a debacle as you could have. I would say it probably was the biggest turnoff of Path of Exile since its inception. Largely contributed to the coronavirus and Path of Exile employees working remotely with, I'd assume, limited oversight. So, it's their one hall pass of a league. It was implemented in the exact same way, pretty much it existed. So, to progress through it, you have to do upwards of 60 quest contracts. There's some unique contracts also that you have to still do quest contracts for. It implemented 128 uniques, 100 replica uniques, which are like shitty knockoffs of existing uniques in most cases. Sometimes they're just better. About 60 new bases for experimental base items. New currency that lets you enchant things and make quality gems. New uniques that can be only found in curio case replacements, which were the end of Grand Heists, of which there were 12, I believe. New jewels and new gear attained from unique contracts, which were Grand Heists but unique versions. It was just, it was the biggest showcase of why editing is important in the creative process. Because the Wikipedia page alone tells the tale of this 19-page debacle. It's like an entire game in itself. But ultimately, it's probably the single most rewarding currency-wise and loot-wise league, especially from a solo self-found perspective, which is even more frustrating because I feel like I have to do it because it's just that good. Overall, you go into a shitty map, you get your insane experience, you get your insane loot, you hope the game doesn't bug out, and you leave before it all crashes. That's Heist League in a nutshell. Which leads us to our current league, Ritual League. Ritual League is a very, very simple mechanic, and it's a really great feeling after coming from Heist. In Ritual League, you walk up to a clickable shrine type thing that, 2 to 4 of them spawn in a zone, and you kill a couple monsters, then you click the button, then you kill a couple more monsters, and then you get some currency. You can spend this currency in the shop, and then the shop has a couple items of which you can, put things on layaway and, put a payment plan on them, or you could buy them outright, and if you don't like what's in the shop, you can hit reroll. That's the entire mechanic. It's just as simple as that. It's fantastic. It also drops splinters, which you can use to make blood vessels, and these store your monsters and make your next ritual a little bit more juiced up, but I just hold on to these until the end game. But yeah, Ritual is a great league. It basically has the loot from every previous league scattered throughout its shop in some way, shape, or form. It's got a lot of the mechanics implemented in the actual ritual itself, from ghosts to, bleeding, for nemesis mods, whatever. It's a very simple league with a very simple time, and it's got nice rewards, and there's something so beautiful about that. So will it be an impact in the game as a whole going forward, like the depths of, Delve, or like the insane mapping overhaul that was Delirium? No, but it's just a fun time. You do the rituals, you get the loot, you hope to get something nice, and if not, you put it on payment plan, you come back next time. No complaints about Ritual League altogether. It's just, it's like having ice cream on a summer day. Is it going to impact your life in a major way? Probably not, but is it a nice little treat? For sure. Anyway, that's my entire spiel. This took longer than intended. I have no idea how long this video is going to be at all. But that was me reviewing all 32 leagues in some way, shape, or form. I tried to do it a minute each, and I totally fucked that up. Some of these were like 10-minute talks, but there it is. I'm at Lighty. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.